Welcome to Nav Chat, the show for the New Zealand orienteering and navigation sports community.
Hey Tom, how's it going?
Hey, good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. In Wellington, and I've had some days off actually. So I've been training pretty well since April, since around Easter, and their training culminated in the Moka Moka Manta, which is a exciting local race down here.
Down the Rimatakas, right? Or
pretty low key. Yeah, it is in the southern end of the Rimatakas, and it's quite a varied run. It's got a really long flat coastal four-wheel drive track, and then it's got a super ruthless valley. The only thing I've done like it was like Goat Pass. There's a lot of boulder hopping on the way up, and not really a well-formed trail going over the saddle.
Cool.
Kind of felt more like a trapping line, and then a really steep descent, and then like a 10-kilometer flyer down a really well-formed trail to the finish. So that was really fun. It was a big test, 2 hours 43 for me, so long enough to get tired.
Did the legs hold up okay?
They did. They held up quite well actually. I was really happy, but it certainly revealed a few kind of injuries that I've had just smoldering under the surface for the past month. My right calf is not impressed at the moment, so I've just had 2 weeks off trying to get that guy to settle down, and I've been having a few little problems with just a small muscle on the side of my left leg as well, and it didn't seem to be a big problem, but I gave it a good strain in the race. Like not a tendonitis or anything, it was just the muscle was too tight and I just strained it big time, and so I definitely wasn't running for a few days afterwards because I was sore as. So
I think
just
you and
taking it easy.
I think you and I train very differently. You've got your like plans and rests. I'm just out there doing junk Ks week in, week out, zone 3 training all day, every day.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely avoid the zone 3, if only just to prevent getting kind of unnecessarily injured. Like I just like the consistency of actually being able to train and not second guess yourself, and so anything to kind of not be injured, I think is quite nice.
I think for me, I think I'm just too soft to do intervals anymore.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing as well. Is if you are going to polarize the training and do lots of zone 1 and zone 2, then you've also got to back it up.
You've got to do the 4s and the 5s as well. So this month on Nav Chat, you had a chat with Toby Scott, who's someone who a lot of people who are new to orienteering in New Zealand might not have met. Toby, he's been overseas for a wee while.
That's right. Toby was with us in Auckland at university when we were all hanging out there and training, and I went to jaywalk with him, and he moved to Germany a few years ago, and he's been living and working in Germany since then, and he's done a number of races for New Zealand.
He's been regular in the WOC team lately, hasn't he? Yeah.
Yep. Really good, and he had a really good result at the long distance at World Champs a few years ago in Norway, and he was in Indrafal 2 weekends ago, I think it was, maybe just 1 weekend ago, with Tim Robinson also there, and they raced a long distance and middle distance and a relay. So I asked Toby about the terrain because the tracking looked really cool, and I wanted to hear about the challenges he faced. And he was also at WOC, but we didn't really hear from him because we were so focused on Tim. So I think it was really nice to hear from Toby, who's out there being one of our lone 2 representatives.
And Idrefjäll is a bit more of a alpine area in Sweden, I understand. So the maps look a little different from your standard Swedish white forest. So it's a chance to see some slightly different Swedish maps, and also to get an insight from Toby. Should we have a listen?
Yeah, let's have a look.
Hey Toby, thanks for coming on Nav Chat. We're really keen to hear from you about the recent World Cup that you ran in Sweden.
Yeah.
How was it for you?
No worries. It was really good fun. I didn't have the greatest race, but happy to talk about it.
I think it'd be really interesting.
A bit of learning.
Yeah.
for me as well, even.
Yeah. What races were on this World Cup and what ones did you do?
So there was a long distance first on the Thursday. Then we had rest day, and then middle distance on Saturday, and relay on Sunday.
Cool.
And the relay and middle were in the same area, and long was not too far away from that.
How do you guys do the relay? Because it's just you and Tim are the only New Zealanders in Europe at the moment.
Yeah, so for that relay we had we teamed up with Henry McNulty from Australia.
Oh, cool.
And made a kind of Oceania team. Yeah.
Cool. So here's the map of the middle distance. We'll actually quickly look at the long distance just to get a few of your thoughts on that terrain, but then we'll focus on the middle.
Okay.
This terrain looks outrageous.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean both the middle and the long terrain were really crazy, really fun terrain. Also really challenging. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got you here in the
There you go.
Purple here. What was the most challenging part of this course for you?
For me, the most challenging was really the second half. I was quite tired by the time I got to the run through, and I'd been running a fair bit with other guys before that, so we were pushing the pace quite a bit. And by the time I got to the run through, I noticed I was pretty tired. And at the run through, it was actually a map exchange, so we didn't know what the course was like, and picked up the map, and it's like straight uphill.
Mm-hmm.
I'm already feeling pretty dead. So
this looks like it here. You've separated from these other runners who you're with.
Yeah, I noticed that I was really tired at the run through, and I was going relatively slow up the hill. And then kind of at the top, this whole area was actually a lot rockier than it looks on the map. And
you mean big boulders or stony on the ground?
More kind of stony on the ground, but it was quite sharp stones and quite tough to run across. And I hadn't really noticed it for the first half of the course, but by the time I was tired running across the rocks, I was really noticing that I didn't have as good balance as at the start of the course, and that started to really cost me a lot of energy, and my speed just completely dropped in the second half. And I think in terms of time, I lost at least 10 minutes just from speed in the second half.
Okay.
Compared to my speed from the first half. And
sounds like a tough long distance.
Yeah, it was very, very tough. At the end, I was feeling pretty battered. I mean, especially with the rocks. I noticed that after the race that my feet were just really sore, like feeling really bruised from running on all the rocks. So yeah.
Was this area much the same with the stoniness? There's not quite as much stony ground on this map.
Yeah, it's definitely just the stony this terrain here. So they haven't really mapped any of like the stony ground, because most of the time it's kind of covered in like a thin layer of moss. So you don't really notice it when you're looking at the ground, but when you're running over it, you notice that it's very stony underfoot. It's
cool.
quite uneven, really.
Okay, that's challenging. Right, so this is you here in the middle distance in the black at the bottom of the screen. Can you describe the first part of this course? It looks really interesting. Lots of little re-entrants and spurs and shapes on these slopes.
So it's the first half of the course is really high detail, and I don't know if you can show maybe the whole map quickly, but kind of when I picked up the map, I kind of looked at the whole course and saw, okay, the first half looks really tough and technical, and the second half looks like it's just running and they've set it up for TV. So I was kind of like thinking, okay, put a bit of focus in the first half and then try and still have some speed for the second half. So that was like basic race plan when I picked up the map. And yeah, going I guess to the first control, it was a nice, easy to control to start because of the ride. Once you'd found the ride, it made life very, very simple. And could almost just follow that into the control. And then coming out to control 2, I noticed a bit of a track, so I actually just ran on that for a while and then got on the compass to go through yeah, just to the right of that large hill, just so that I had a good attack point into the control and just playing it safe there.
This looks quite a scary one, actually.
Yeah, this was probably yeah, my first mistake, really. So for control 3, I noticed that as I was coming up, I was climbing the hill and just I was trying to keep my speed going up the hill, and so I wasn't quite running exactly on the compass. And I noticed that I was veering a little bit off to the left. But once I got to the kind of spur, I thought I spotted the yellow, and so I kind of misread where I was, and I actually ran past a couple of boulders just beyond the spur and noticed them, which helped me actually relocate later once I'd realized I was much too low. But initially, yeah, so kind of running through that point there exactly, I thought I'd seen the yellow, but it was just a slightly more open area in the forest. I wasn't actually running over it, and then I managed to pick up my mistake, and once I'd thought about where I'd actually been running and what direction I'd been running at the start of the leg, I kind of realized, no, I must be way too low. And I also spotted a bit of swamp, which helped me out there. But that was really, in terms of direction, quite a bad leg. So I probably should have stayed more on the compass and just taken the hill on. Another thing which I should say, when I woke up this morning for the middle, Tim had been sick for the long, and I was feeling fine, and then on the day of the middle, I woke up with a bit of a sore throat, so I was feeling a bit, yeah, I guess a bit not great about running fast. So I was being a bit more cautious, I guess, could say.
Yeah, well, this loop here looks really tricky, but you've got through them.
Yeah, so here I was running
well.
a bit with the Latvian. Uptus Uldus, I think his name is. And for control 5, I really focused on finding that yellow reentrant on the way, and actually used that also on the way to 8, because I'd identified that quite well on the way out. And then also just for 5 also, what else did I use? I also used the kind of flat area just before it to with the Marshner. Yeah,
you're really, this course has really pushed you to be really scraping the barrel as to what's unique and what stands out.
So yeah, I think those 2 features were the ones I was looking for, because they seem to be the most unique on that slope. And I think that was kind of the trick to the slope, is trying to find the unique features. So for me, that was the cliff, the yellow reentrant, the second cliff, and that flat area as well.
Cool. Yeah, I think you've got to be really serious about what you're looking for. Looking for a reentrant in this first half of the course is so risky. Let's jump to.
You can try and count them, but you'll lose count. You'll mistake one. Yeah.
So where do you consider that change from the first style to the second style? 10 to 11 is looking a bit different.
Yeah, the course changes from 10. So kind of getting up to 10, you have a lot of very fine orienteering, and then from 10 onwards, it's much more longer legs and relies a lot on your judgment of how far you're running, how fast you're running, and your direction, making sure you have very good direction, making sure you have height control.
Height control. Here we go.
Yeah. So those were like the really big topics for the second half, and I'd completely underestimated its difficulty. So looking at it beforehand, I thought, oh, it looks pretty straightforward. It's just going to be about running, and they just want some nice TV shots. But that really wasn't true at all. So I think the course only really started from control 13, I would say.
This is very dangerous, isn't it? The smooth slope coming into a very small piece of detail.
I think the first interesting control is really control 11, because a lot of people made a mistake on that one. And the interesting thing about that is it's very easy to avoid making a mistake there if you have a different plan. And you can see so just right there, if you pause it now, you can see where so myself and the Latvian who I was with got a bit too low running along the slope and didn't really have a good attack point after that, whereas the French guy is running up on the top. It's actually much better running on the top as well in terms of running speed. You have a nice visibility. You can see exactly where the trees stop and start. And coming from the top of the hill, you can tell exactly where that bend in the contour is. If you're lower down, there's not really a bend in the contour anymore. Yeah.
Straight.
So I think there it's very important to just gain a little bit of height coming out of the control and get much better running and just stay a little bit more left. So really, that was just a small amount of laziness coming out of the control can make a huge difference there. Knowing your plan. So it was quite strange. By the time I was at 10, I wasn't feeling that great about how I'd done on the course. And then I made a pretty big mistake to 11. I ended up down at the river, but then running up the hill, I spotted the French guy who actually started 2 minutes ahead of me, and I hadn't seen him at all on the course. So it kind of let me think, oh, it's not quite as bad as I thought. But so then I still had the mindset, oh, it's still quite fast from here. It should be quite straightforward. But I did spot that 14 as a really dangerous control.
Yeah, it looks like you've lost a little bit at 14. It is very dangerous.
Yes. So 14, I'd estimated coming in that I was, if anything, a little bit off to the right, and then we kind of landed on the boulder, but just one contour too low. And I hadn't really recognized that was the boulder there. I hadn't even really spotted it on the map that just behind the control there was that boulder, and I ended up running, I think, back running almost to the stony ground to the south of the control, and kind of spotted that. And even then, trying to run back from that, I actually didn't climb up enough to get the control, and ran below the control too far in the other direction. So yeah, that was, I guess, just had to be I'm really not sure how to do that control better, because it's just yeah, a really dangerous control. bit slower on the compass, and just being sure once you get there to look for some other features. I hadn't really looked closely enough around the control as to what I might run into, and I could tell where the hill was kind of starting to get steeper, so I know I wasn't going too far, but beyond that it was just searching. So
yep, and similar for 15 as well. You've got very little to use.
Yeah,
and
15
too
should
low.
actually be quite an easy control if you stick to the plan. So my plan was just keep your height, keep on exactly the same height, and you should run straight into the control. It was a little bit trickier along the hillside because it was quite rocky and uneven. And also I think when I left the control, I dropped a little bit more than I should have starting. And then once I got close to the control, because I was just thinking, oh, you just have to go fast, you'll see the control. Once I got there, I actually forgot my plan and spotted a bit of a reentrant down below me and ran down to it, which kind of doesn't make sense at all. I just need to stay on the same height. So that was yeah, that was quite a disappointing control actually, because I also noticed that once I did spot that small reentrant below me, and that I wasn't far enough, that I must be too low actually, and started to climb up, but it didn't actually climb up enough. And then managed to run straight past the reentrant where the control was, and still try and drop down again. Yeah.
So again, for these last few, you're getting through these ones okay by the looks of it, but it's the same challenge, isn't it? Very little to use, small control feature. And yeah, we did see mistakes on these last few, even amongst the top guys. So the pressure was definitely on and pushing people to take risks.
Yeah, again, these controls have to be very good on the compass, and also around 17, it was quite a lot wetter than it had rained the last day, so there was a bit more extra marsh, and they'd actually said that I think in the team leaders meeting or something, they said there's got to be more water on the ground than is actually mapped, just because of how much rain they've had recently. So coming into 17, just beyond the track there was the small marsh, and I was a little bit unsure if I'd gotten a bit too low already, but actually it was just right under the line. You can see there's a bit of a reentrant just right next to the path, and that was quite marshy even.
Okay.
Yeah, just around there was quite marshy.
Cool. Well, thanks for taking me through that course, and yeah, good luck with whatever your next races are in Europe.
Yeah.
What's the plan?
Looking, I'm going to be running in Italy for the World Cup, the last World Cup. Tim should be there as well. It looks like we'll be the only two from New Zealand, but should be some fun terrain.
Cool. Yeah, we'll be watching. Thanks, Toby.
Great. No worries.
What did you think?
I thought it was good to hear a good detailed breakdown of some orienteering, and I think hearing Toby speak about it, he's obviously really sorted in his head about what his orienteering process involves, because I thought he did a really good job of explaining errors and what he was thinking about, and kind of relating it back to a very understandable orienteering process. I thought that was really insightful.
Yeah, I definitely could see he's got a lot of insight into his own orienteering.
There are a few things which I think leapt out to me about things that he did, which I think are really good things to encourage. So I think in the middle distance, he talked about first control taking a very easy option. He spoke about trying to pick up a ride, a gap in the trees, which took him almost to the control. I think it's really good to emphasize that even if you're racing at a World Cup, you still take the track option if it's there. There's no point in trying to needlessly make your life more difficult if you don't need to.
Yeah, it's surprisingly true at the top. You can see, you saw this at World champs as well a month ago.
People go wide, people look for tracks.
Yep.
People look for handrails, times when they can give themselves a bit of a cognitive rest. He also highlighted some of the differences between Scandinavian terrain and New Zealand terrain. I'm no Scandinavian orienteering expert, but his comments about the marshes were interesting. He mentioned that a few times. The marshes, as you'd know as well, Gene, the marshes over in Scandinavia can be quite a different proposition to Kiwi marshes. The runnability can be pretty good. They're usually really clearly mapped, and as a navigation feature, they give a really obvious break in the trees, especially in some parts of Scandinavia more than others. So I guess what a lot of his comments fed into were, I guess you could distill it down to simplification. And while there were some parts of those maps that were like super detailed, really varied, Toby was able to really clearly explain the few simple features that he was using to navigate. Mm-hmm. So I think that's what you wanted to talk about today. We wanted to talk a wee bit about simplification in detail-rich areas, and also the contra. When you have an area like the second half of that middle distance course Toby did, where you're really lacking controls, how can you deal with either heaps of detail or no detail at all?
Yeah,
cue up some maps.
Yeah, we'll have a look at some maps. I think I will also premise this discussion by just the importance of being able to realize that as a challenge, as opposed to just seeing every leg as a leg, actually defining the difficulty up front. As soon as you start that new leg, tell yourself, is this a detailed leg that's going to be really challenging? Is this a really easy leg and maybe I can get a cognitive rest? Or is this a very vague leg that's going to be really hard? If you're not able to identify where you should be applying more techniques, then you're going to run into trouble, I think, more than you need to. So
we talked about it a few months ago, didn't we, with a risk-based approach. So
that's right. You don't have to go. You don't have to know exactly where you are on every single leg, but you really have to know exactly where you are when it counts.
Definitely. Yep. Where are we going first for our first bit of terrain?
So this is an exercise that I think is really useful for dealing with highly detailed areas, because it forces you to triage, essentially. There's a lot of things you could use, and you've got to ignore most of them and just choose things you want to use. And if you do this kind of exercise under a really tight time limit, then it really puts the pressure on. So what you can see on the screen is two different maps, you could say, two different pieces of paper that will be printed out like this. One is the full course, and one is the same purple lines, but the map's been blanked out. And your job is to redraw a few things to get you through the course. And if you do this under a really tight time limit.
Old school, when we had to draw the control circles on.
This is
except the opposite. Except we got to draw the map on.
That's right. You've got to draw the map on. So, I mean, it's even more terrifying. But it's amazingly doable. So this is a video that's on the coaching framework, and I really recommend that people try it. This is kind of the level of detail that I would end up putting on the map to get me to these controls. So it's not a redraw, and it's fairly accurate, but it's really significant. These are the things that are in the terrain that I will see from a distance. I will see them reliably. I won't mistake them for something else. And so that's how you turn this crazy detailed area into a usable and very simple map.
Yeah, so I guess essentially we've talked about simplification before. We've talked about trying to choose features that are unique, visible, and rapidly identifiable at speed. But this is taken at that next level. And you can either do this as an armchair exercise. You can get a blank piece of paper, get a map, put the blank piece of paper over the top of the old map, just trace through the course, and then with a bit of time pressure, just draw the bits on you need between the controls. You can take it outside as well. You could then take that map and go and run the exercise with the map that you've drawn to see if it's possible. Have you drawn enough? Have you not drawn enough? Were there other things that you found that you were looking for that you didn't know you noticed?
That's right. Yeah, take the feedback. If you're out there and you see something really obvious in the terrain that's not on the map, then you've got to ask yourself, why didn't I see that when I was doing the redraw?
And Toby spoke about this a little bit as well. He alluded to some sorts of features which maybe you wouldn't immediately think of. The one that stood out to me was on the slope. He mentioned he was looking for the area where it leveled out a little bit. Usually when you've got loads of contours, you're looking for contour detail. That is actual shapes in the contours, but rather he was looking for the negative space. Where weren't there contours? And I think on this map as well, we can sort of see that to a degree. You could use some of the flatter areas to help you more so than some of the hill shapes, just because there are so many complicated hills around. So that's the other thing to think about. It's that uniqueness that is an important thing.
Yeah, it's really cool. So let's look at the opposite example. So this is something that I call bubble controls. And we all know what bubbles mean now. It's all distance and isolated from everything else. And the purpose of this exercise is to strip away the handrails and the stepping stones that you would have preferred to use and force you to depend on very little. So in this particular case, you have to depend on your compass a lot. And you have to depend on a good recognition of the features close to where the control is placed, because you're going to come stumbling into the control circle and not be entirely sure exactly when you're going to stumble into it. Your distance judgment should get you close, but you really need to be recognizing, in this case of this first control here, recognizing those two knolls in the hill and the order they're in, and just trying to recognize that as you come running through. So it's definitely the opposite. There's not too much to use. There's too little to use.
This is a different one. This is one's a bit harder to do as a armchair exercise. But if you're out there running, you can try and do it without blanking out the map, but it's very hard. It makes you realize till you're actually given a blank map, it's quite an unusual feeling going out there and running through an area where you've got no detail drawn. But like Toby said, there were, again, using his courses as an example, it doesn't have to be a blank bit of map. It could be a steep, repetitive slope, or it could be the flat top area of a hill. Areas that are relatively lacking in detail, which we do have in orienteering in New Zealand. And doing these sort of exercises will help you think of ways that you can deal with it. Because what are some of the extra techniques you can use apart from compass in this situation, Gene?
The distance judgment is I guess another thing also, whether you're counting paces or you've got your own kind of practiced intuition from many training exercises. If you were using a slope, then contouring is really important. So that is to know what height you're at and holding it really tightly. And being just really disciplined and just not distracted by, the front ability is faster down there, I'll just pop down and get the little faster bit. No, just being really disciplined and making sure you see that exact height all the way through, which is very much the challenge Toby was facing. And it's actually very similar to this. You've got one thing to rely on for 90% of the leg, and then that final 10% is all about control site recognition.
And aiming off is probably another additional piece of the puzzle you could put in there with your compass.
Yeah, that's true. You could make it safer for yourself by not going for gold and actually going for like a small mistake, but a very limited mistake.
Nice. So we've talked a bit about simplification using Toby's races as an example and given some example exercises, ones that can help you take a really detailed area and make them easier to navigate through by choosing unique visible attack points, and you've got an exercise you can try. And then the contra, when you've got an area that's lacking in detail, ways that you can deal with a vague or very repetitive area, to use compass, to use distance judgment and to aim off. And again, you can try bubble orienteering, and both of these are on the ONZ coaching framework.
Yep, that's right. So this is in the red advanced section, and if you go down to the kind of technique that you're interested in, the skill that you're interested in developing, and then open that up, and you'll have a whole bunch of techniques that you can practice, exercises that you can go out and do to practice that technique. So this is where the bubble controls is, and there's some other similar variations. And
great way to spend a bit of time if, I don't know, say you were stuck inside in a lockdown, for example.
Oh yeah, and if you really liked that idea of a simplification exercise, there's some other simplification exercises that are also here under the simplification drop down here. So yeah, check it out. There's a lot of exercises on there.
All right. This, moving on to what's been happening, we've just had obviously, puts a bit of a time stamp on this, but we are into lockdown, so all of our events will have been cancelled around the country.
Yeah, it's a shame. All bets are off as to local activities for now, but we did have some things happen recently. There was the New Zealand Secondary Schools Championships, and Sky Sport were back to that as well. Also, there was a recording crew there, and that footage goes through to Sky Sport, and we're seeing just a step up, I think, in the kind of production, I think, that we're seeing for orienteering. We also saw for the first time in New Zealand the Olinx setup. They had a live stream with Olinx bringing in the splits straight onto the live stream going out. So it was a start. It's not as flashy as watching big races overseas, but yeah, it was really cool. I've never seen live splits come in on like a TV screen before, just popping in there on the side and showing the difference to the leaders and stuff. So that's pretty cool to see.
Yeah, great. The Sky Sport Next is a great idea by Sky Sport to showcase a few more community sports around New Zealand.
Mm-hmm.
And awesome that Orienteering's managed to get involved with that. I think it is good to always be able to show the more racy side of Orienteering, because often I think the more people actually have a chance to see what's happening out in the terrain, the more they're likely to give it a go and try it. So also great that it's New Zealand schools as well. Yeah,
it's super cool. And it makes it a lot easier for a lot of us who are communicators in the orienteering community, because we can flick people a video, and often that can explain things better than we ever could. So yeah, this is
that
really...
Whanafunna where they had the long?
I can't recall the name of the map exactly.
Okay. My very first national champs was on that many moons ago. So from New Zealand schools to the World Cup, we've seen some controls from Toby, but there are a couple of others that you wanted to share.
Yeah. So yeah, with less local news around, I think this is a great time to check out the World Cup long distance. So Toby was telling us about the middle distance mainly, but we did look at the long briefly. This particular leg, 8 to 9 on the women's World Cup long distance, I thought was particularly interesting, and it has these elements that we were talking about with where is the detail and where is not the detail, and how they both pose a challenge. And also it's got this element of the diagonal slope, which is, I think, the navigator's worst enemy. You tend to drift.
The diagonal slope, the downhill diagonal slope.
Yeah, you tend to drift down. And so this is all the competitors' GPS tracking kind of restarted from 8. So obviously they're not in the race as a pack like this. It's just the rerun of the GPS tracks. And you can see from early on, there's already a number of the women's competitors that are drifting down the slope. So I'm definitely concerned for those ones out on the left-hand side.
The
there.
pink. Oh gosh, where are they going? Oh, they're correcting now.
Yep, some of them are correcting, but there's also some that are off to the right-hand side. And I think just look at the spread at the moment, and one would assume those that are far to the left are making a mistake, and those that are far to the right are also making a mistake.
Though the ones on the right, my first thought when I saw this league was to aim off to the creek system closer to 4 and use that as a handrail to shoot me down to the control.
Everyone who hits the system you're talking about with the water course and the little marshes connecting together, no one crosses it. They all it's an amazing catching feature. They all
beautiful
hit it. So everyone, maybe they're a bit slow because they're like, whoa, what's happened? I'm too far to the side. Everyone that was off to the east got caught by it. So no mistakes there. But what happens to those that have drifted off to the west? There's nothing to catch you.
Jean-Pierre is where's she going?
Yeah, so Jean-Pierre screws it up big time. There's a number of others burning time also. But you can see that there's no one off to the east faffing at this stage. All the faffing is happening it's not in the vague area anymore, but it's because of the vague area. It's because they've lost contact at this stage and there's nothing to save them. There's detail to save them. They're going from a vague area where you don't know where you are into a detailed area with repetitive small spurs and small re-entrants.
Which you could say is vague in another way. Sure, there are more.
There's nothing unique.
They're all the same. Yeah. It comes back to what we were saying. It's like you want to think about your control and have a vague idea of the risk. Is this a league where I'm going to need to read lots of detail? Is it a bit more open? Is there a time I can relax? I'd look at this league and I'd say, this is, I remember a jaywalk I did in Italy. There was a league like this, and it was like, from the training, you saw a league like that and you're like, this is a danger zone. Even though it's a medium length league, it appears to not have a huge amount of detail. This is going to require some of the most concentration of the whole day. And like you alluded to, breaking it up, even trying to do a redraw on it. So if I was going to redraw this, I'd just draw a line of contours. I'd put this river system in, and then I'd probably put the re-entrant toward just above the control with the little U depression. I'd probably draw that re-entrant, and then I'd maybe spend a little bit of time just showing how that re-entrant would lead me down into 9.
That thing there?
Yeah. So I'd probably smash my compass till I hit the watercourse, go down until I pick up the gully system, and then in. And you've made what is potentially an extremely dangerous league a little safer.
Yeah, this is absolutely the danger zone here to be avoided.
Nasty control though, gosh.
Yeah, super nasty. This one over here is also
3, 4, 5 looks pretty grim as well.
This is uphill, and it's just, again, a lot of repeating features, small hills, stone boulders and stony ground.
I don't know what you think about this, Gene, but looking at these diagonal slopes, I think you can make arguments for one uphill or downhill being harder. I think with downhill you're going faster, so you tend to make a bigger error. But uphill you're also probably going more into oxygen debt, and that brain's not working quite as well. So there's downsides to both. A lot of risk.
Cool. So you wanted to tell us about another local area. Who's this, Tom?
Well, yeah, any guesses? I won't give it away. People can madly try and think. This is off New Zealand OMAP. This is somewhere in New Zealand. That narrows it down. What I was going to say, and this is what I mentioned to you before the record, was about seeing that middle distance map that Toby used made me think. Essentially, the organisers there have run a World Cup on an area that at first glance doesn't look that suitable for a World Cup. Sure, it had a real interesting initial slope, but quite a boring large hill, quite repetitive slopes to the finish. But they managed to make it into a really challenging course that was actually fitting for a World Cup. Made me just reflect a bit on New Zealand and how we could apply that sort of thinking to some of the terrain around the country. We know that orienteering is easier when you don't have to drive for miles, and it's better for the world as well if we're not driving miles and miles. So maybe we just need to rethink some of the areas nearby. This area, it's in Northland. There's a hint. I just picked this. I was just hooning around in NZ OMAP, and I thought this was a really good example of how we could, with good creative course setting, rethink an area. What on the surface, it's Ruakaka Beach. What on the surface looks like some scrubby, kind of regenerating bush behind the dunes and some paddocks. could quite easily become a pretty interesting area for orienteering. So with some careful course setting, you could have, just like they did on that slope, a little loop of controls with direction change, using the vegetation as barriers, trying to challenge that direction and kind of vegetation-based navigation of the orienteers. Then you switch that up to have some angled controls entering other little areas or crossing multiple vegetation boundaries. I think you could set a really challenging wee course here.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be a heap of fun to run.
Yeah, and we've now got the omap.nz to explore these areas as well. So
exactly. So yeah, that was what I was thinking. I was thinking maybe that's something we need to think about a bit more. And when we were speaking about that, it sounds like you're doing the same in Wellington.
Yeah, that's right. So I'll just bring this up. So yeah, I'm actually controlling, so helping to organize an event on an area that don't want to be offensive to the locals, but let's call it a compromised area. If you come from a purist orienteering background, you can't set a red course on this area that is technically demanding the whole time. So let's reframe it a little bit. Maybe it doesn't have to be super precise technical orienteering the whole time, and we can set a course that's just very focused on route choice. And the control sites are going to be kind of orange, to be honest, for the most part. And the routes are going to be a lot of track running. But we do this stuff in training sometimes. Maybe we should just have a race course that isn't so purely balanced between route choice and tight control sites and all these things that we like to have all of the elements together for the perfect race. And we just have a race that's just a local race that's really heavily weighted towards route choice. And so that's what we're going to do. And it's kind of moved from, if we have to do that because there's nothing else to really do with the area, to, well, let's do it. Let's set some amazing route choices on a local area that people have maybe not used and seen through that lens before. So really steep, a lot of dense vegetation, a lot of trails, and there's a cemetery here as well that provides some really awkward angles. And yeah, I'm optimistic we can do something really interesting with an area like this.
I guess it's leaning into what you've got and trying to, instead of like yearning to have lovely white forest with rock details scattered through it that's not too steep, not too flat, better to just say, hey, this is what we got. What are the challenges of our local terrain and how can we make this work for us?
That's right. A few other things about this map is it's not up to date. It's 2.5 meter LiDAR contours thrown on top of some old vegetation. So like we've got a few challenges working with this area. We're tightening it up a bit, but we're not going to map it to high precision. We're going to map it enough so that the route choices are interesting and fair. And so just reframing it, I think, really lowers the barrier to setting a satisfactory orienteering race. And when trying to deal with this vegetation, it's maybe 10, 15 years old. I'm not sure that's what it feels like to me. But I'm also going on to the omap.nz website, and this is the vegetation. This is the same area with 5 meter contours and 1 to 10,000 kind of map. But the vegetation is far more up to date. This was an auto-generated map from scans done, aerial LiDAR scans from 2019 and 2020. So the vegetation's far more up to date, and I can put this behind the map in OCAD and just redraw the vegetation from the scan. Is it field worked? No. Are there going to be mistakes? Yeah, the auto-generated maps definitely don't pick up some kind of trees very well.
Nika palms.
Yeah. They don't pick up supplejack at all.
Yeah, true.
So
true, that's very relevant in the Waikato. I'll tell you that for free.
Yeah, so it's white and you get there and it should be flat, impassable vegetation. So, there are errors, but in terms of getting a product out the door, you can do this with a lot less manpower just by reframing what the event's supposed to be like. And actually, I think Wellington are quite good at this. They've been innovating with this, these events that in Auckland we would consider alternative styles, right? That's how they get it done. And they've got these row games and these night events, and they just have all sorts going on. And they're making it happen with what we've got.
Well, hopefully we're going to get these back soon. But in the meantime, if people are locked down, do remember ONZ has the coaching framework. If you run out of memes to look at on the internet, or you've finished reading Wikipedia, jump on ONZ and have a read. There's some good quality stuff there. Maybe even get ready planning some events if you're thinking of using your time for something productive to help your club.
Mm-hmm. Check out some of these GPS tracking.
Nice. Cool. All right. Should we wrap it up there, Gene?
Yeah, I think we'll wrap it up for another month and see you in September.
Sounds good. See you later.
Yeah.
If you liked the show, please support it by sharing this podcast with one person who would benefit from it. The best place to find more content like this is at genebeveridge.nz, where you can find years of training blogs, race reports, podcasts, and coaching videos. If you don't want to miss future episodes, I recommend subscribing to my newsletter by visiting genebeveridge.nz or by following on social media, Perfect Flow on Facebook and Gene Beveridge on Instagram. For Q&A, send messages to nav@perfectflow.nz.